All right, welcome to the show today, everyone. You are in for a very special treat. Our guest today is Joel Friedlander. Joel is the author of several books, including the Self-Publisher's Quick and Easy Guides, a series of ebooks that help to solve key challenges for self-publishers. Joel has won the IAGA 50 Books of the Year Award for his work at Aperture Publishing and the Printing Industries of America Gold Award for his book design and production. Joel is the owner of Marin Bookworks of San Rafael, California, and he runs the very popular site for self-publishing information at thebookdesigner.com. Joel, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us about your background, how you got started in the publishing industry.
Yeah, well, I started very young. I grew up as the son of a printer, so I was kind of around printing and graphic arts most of my life. And I enjoyed that. I went into design because I thought that was a lot more fun than standing next to a printing press. And eventually I went into advertising, which was fun and lucrative, but they had these crazy deadlines all the time. They didn't care how much it cost. They just wanted it like now. And that didn't really fit my my predilection so well. So I went into, I've always loved books. I'm a writer and an author. I have been for many years. So I became a book designer many years ago. I worked in the book publishing industry at Aperture Books, a very high-end photography book publisher. And then I started my own company, Marin Bookworks, where I provided services mostly for small to medium-sized book publishers. And then I opened it up to authors because there were so many authors who wanted to publish their own books. Now, I got into that myself because I wrote a book in the 1980s, and I knew that no publisher, because I was working in the publishing business at the time, I knew no publisher would publish the book. It just was one of those books that would fall between the cracks. Nobody wanted it, so I decided to publish it myself. I published that in 1986. I did a second edition in 1992, and that book is still for sale today. It sells every month. So I've been in and around book publishing for a long time. I do a lot of consulting with authors, public speaking, that kinds of stuff, and I just love making books.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, huh?
Yeah.
So you mentioned you worked in book design, and I know nowadays that can mean so many different things. There's cover design, there's designing the inside of a print book and ebooks and audiobooks, all that stuff. So what actual kind of design work were you doing back then when you got started?
Well, most of the design I was doing was oriented around book interiors. Now, in that kind of business, basically the designers, I would call myself more of a book producer, because I would get a manuscript and then I would hire in all the subcontractors I needed for the job. If we needed illustrations, I'd hire an illustrator. We needed editors, copy editors, proofreaders. I'd hire in all the talent, and I would design the interior of the book. Now, in traditional publishing, the book interiors are treated completely separately from the covers. They have nothing to do with each other. They're usually done by completely different people at different times in the publishing process. The cover is usually done way at the beginning. It's part of the marketing of the book, when they're figuring out who they're going to sell the book to and how. And then the interiors are done way later at the end of the process. So I mostly worked on book interiors, and that's where a lot of my expertise lies. I then moved into doing covers and complete book production for authors and publishers. So I kind of been around the block. I've just worked on so many books over the years. One of the interesting perspectives that's given me, Tom, is to understand all the different kinds of books that self-publishers can produce. Now, today in 2016, when we're recording this, a lot of people figure self-publishing is, writing romance novels and publishing them on Kindle, period. That's the end of it. But the fact of the matter is that self-publishers can produce many, many different kinds of books very profitably if they have the right market and know how to produce those books.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious about how your experience in the industry and how things have changed, because you mentioned, hiring illustrators and designers and graphic artists and, all this stuff that went into, publishing a traditional book.
Yeah.
How has that changed, today, in 2016, as a self-published author, let's say you wanted to come out with a book tomorrow and you needed to hire out all these different services. What would those costs look like, and what would that process look like nowadays?
Well, the problem, of course, is, and this has been true since the beginning of the computer revolution, the digitization of culture and industry. What's happened is that, we now have the responsibility for hiring all these people. Now, authors used to be, all they had to do was write the book and find an agent, and that was pretty much the end of it. Now, the author, if you want to publish your own book, you have to know how to hire an editor. How do you do that? Where do you find them? Most people have no idea. How do you hire a cover designer? How do you know if you've got the right designer for your kind of book? So all of the responsibility for these tasks has devolved from the big publishing companies down onto the individual author. And what that's done, Thomas, has created a huge need for education and training of authors who want to go into book publishing. And that's partly why my blog and the work I do has become very popular, because I'm a good information source. So when people are looking to educate themselves about how to take on and complete all these tasks in a profitable way, they start looking for information. As far as the costs are concerned, that's a big, the answer to that is, well, it could cost very little or it could cost a huge amount. But again, it really has to do with the kind of book you're publishing and the market you're publishing it to and what your intentions are. So I did a series of articles a few years ago on my blog about the cost of self-publishing. I identified 3 different kinds of publishers, authors who would be publishers, and 9 different cost areas. And what I got to at the end, I'm not going to read you all those articles, but what I got to at the end was you could publish a book. I think the low end price was about $120. And then the top end price really, for people who are trying to do a front list book that they're going to push out in a national campaign. In other words, they think they're going to sell it in bookstores all across the country. Those books are generally, people are budgeting from $20,000 and up for those books.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know that the range can be huge, and so it's good to know. But I like to give people those ranges because, like if someone goes in expecting to spend $100,000, their entire life savings, like you said, education is the most important component when you're going into this business. And I've seen a lot of authors make a lot of mistakes just wasting a ton of money investing in services that are overpriced or not the right kind, or that they don't even need at all. So it's just good to, have that education and have the kind of benchmark to weigh yourself against.
Yeah, I'll give you another one too, because I would say that people today who are doing, let's say, a professional quality book, and they're going to do it in print and as an ebook, I would say they're spending between $3,000 and $6,000 for that project, depending on the book. Obviously, you can have a 100-page book or a 600-page book. It makes a big difference. So we just say book, but a book could have a lot of things in it. And each element you add, if the book gets longer, if it's more complicated, like some nonfiction books are very complex, structurally complex, you have to determine how to communicate the hierarchy of knowledge that's in the book to the reader. That might be charts, graphs, diagrams, photos. I mean, there's just if you add an index, that's going to add time and money to your production. So all of these things enter into it. But I think if you were trying to produce a professional quality book in print and ebook, you probably are going to need somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000.
Gotcha. So I'd like to talk about a couple of different types of books, like you mentioned, that maybe are a little, less often published, but can have a little more complications. So I know things like maybe children's books, or coffee table books, or books that are really heavy in art and graphics and so forth. How does people go about self-publishing those books? Because I know you can't just go to like CreateSpace and get a print-on-demand coffee table book style book with a big hardcover and strange sizes and dimensions and so forth. So for these kind of different types of books that don't fit the standard print-on-demand process, what options out there are available for people?
Yeah, and there are a lot of reasons why you might have to rule out print on demand. You know, people hear about print on demand, and print on demand is awesome. Are you kidding? I love print on demand. And then they want to do every book print on demand, but not all books suit that particular kind of production and distribution and process. So like you mentioned, you could be doing a coffee table book, and that would be a larger format book with a hardcover binding, probably in color, printed on coated paper. And most likely those books are almost all going to be printed in Asia. Okay, and they're printed by offset. That's on a big printing press like you're used to seeing, you know, one of those huge machines with the big sheets of paper, etc. So obviously that's completely different world than print on demand. If you want to do a book like that, my best advice is to hire a book designer who's familiar with producing those books. Okay, first of all, the designer is going to be a big help in figuring out how to lay out the book, what the right trim size is for the book, because you can't just pick a number out of the air. Oh, I want my book to be 3 inches this way, but 17 inches that way. No, that's never going to work. You know, either you can't produce it, or if you can get somebody to do it, it's going to cost so much you'll never be able to sell it at a profit. So that's a problem. And the book designer who knows how to work with these kind of books will know print brokers who deal with printers in Asia. They'll know which printers might be best for that job. And a lot of other details like, you know, how the color images get corrected for printing in different processes. You know, you can't just drop your files in there and then just send them to the printer and hope that it's going to come out the way it looks on your screen, because it's never going to look the way it looks on your screen. And a professional who knows how to deal with those things can do that. But there are other kinds of books. For instance, I just did a book last year for, it was an insurance textbook. The insurance textbook had to be a case wrap book. And that's one of those like a textbook, you know, a hardcover book where the cover is actually printed and then pasted on the case. It doesn't have a dust jacket like a novel. So that book was just full of, first of all, it was all like 2-column layouts and charts and tables, you know, all kinds of actuarial tables. I mean, just very, very complex. It was 8.5 by 11 case bound, and it was very expensive to produce. But here's the thing. If you know how to do that properly and you have the right market, it can be done. In this case, we did the book, and even though the cost was very high, the client decided to go print on demand, and the books were costing him about $17 each production cost. So you might ask yourself, well, how the heck does that work? You can't make money if you have to pay $17 to get the book done. But Tom, here's the secret. A textbook cost $150 retail. So a lot of the times with these books that don't work in print on demand, and even with many books that do, there's a meeting between the production, the way the books are produced, and the marketing concept for that book. And when you get those things to line up, then you have the chance of a very successful publication. If they don't line up, then you're probably either going to be selling no books or losing money with every sale. So getting the production and the marketing connected so that you know like what that market wants to buy, the kind of books they expect, what they're expecting from a book, what their figure they're going to have to pay, that all goes into, that should go into the thinking about the book, like maybe if it's nonfiction, before you actually start writing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that just makes sense that you know, you need to do the research ahead of time and really understand it. And, you know, some book markets are totally different, like a textbook for $150. I mean, you can't sell, you know, a short how-to guide on Kindle for $150. No one's going to buy it, but this is a completely different market. So, yeah, I mean, this is really important stuff to know ahead of time. Like you said, you know, how the book is going to be produced, because, you know, if you try to produce a $17, you know, novel, there's no way you can profit on that.
Here's another one I get all the time, and this is straight print on demand, and that is the author would like a 300,000 word manuscript. It's not really that uncommon, to be honest with you. I just had somebody here with a 600-page print on demand paperback. So that's crazy. I mean, particularly for fiction, because as you know, in fiction, people have a real ceiling on what they're going to pay for fiction because they view it as entertainment, which is okay. I mean, it's like if somebody wanted you to pay $30 to go see a movie. Well, nobody's going to go, are they? Because they can go down the street and see a movie for $10. So it's the same thing. I mean, if you have a really, really long novel and you want to do a print-on-demand paperback, you know, you have to, you have a problem, basically. You're going to have to deal with that somehow because that book is just going to be too expensive to produce to allow you to have the discount you need to give to the retailers to get them to sell your book for you.
Gotcha. So what would you recommend in that case? Because I know I get this question all the time as well. People have, you know, unusually large books, 700 pages, you know, 1,000 pages, 300,000 words sometimes. So what would your advice be then to that author of different options that they could have to make that actually work and be profitable for them?
Sure. You do have a couple of options. I mean, the most obvious option would be to split the book up. Now, sometimes that works. I just had an author I was consulting with a couple of weeks ago, and he had a book just like that. And when he started really looking at the book, he realized it could easily be 3 books. Now, 3 books is going to be a much better situation for him than dumping it all into the one book and trying to make everything on that one book. With 3 books, he can start small. He could put the first one out and, you know, eventually turn that into a freebie to help try and, you know, get people into the story. And then he's got a second book, and then he's got a third book. And let's face it, if he has 3 books and they're $9.99 each, he's selling you a book for $30. But it's a whole different, you know, the whole perception of it is different. Another option you have is to get rid of print on demand. You know, go to offset printing. That's more complicated, but the books will cost a lot less, maybe half of what you're paying in print on demand. So if you actually know that you're going to sell, let's say, 500 paperbacks in the next 6 months, you could go to a short-run book printer and buy those copies at half the price. Think of the profit. The difference in the profits, Tom, is substantial. So if I'm paying, let's say, $4 for the production cost at CreateSpace, and I can buy them for $2 somewhere else, but I have to buy 500 at a time, I mean, you figure it out. There's the profit you have in each book just like multiplies. Now, it's more complicated. You've got to become a vendor to Amazon because you're now the distributor, basically, instead of CreateSpace or Ingram being the distributor. And I would say the third option for that author would be put the paperback aside for now. Publish the book as an ebook and go through the whole process. Launch the book, market the book, see how the sales are, see if there's a demand from your audience for the paperback book. And a lot of novelists have found this. They've had very successful ebooks, and then readers start to ask, hey, are you ever going to do a paperback? And once you have people asking for it, you're in a much better situation to do a successful print book, even if it is a little bit more expensive, because those people who are asking for it, they're going to buy it. Even if it's $25, they're going to buy it because they've already loved the book and they want that print book. Because the print book has, you know, a different kind of gravitas to it. That's 3 options.
Great, that's a great option. So I just want to hone in on option number 2 there, because I think most authors never even consider, you know, like you said, going to an offset printer, you know, getting a short print run of 500 books or so, because they don't understand, you know, okay, so let's say I get my printer in Asia or whatever, like, you know, and I order 500 books. Do they just sit in my garage? What happens next? So can you walk us through that kind of supply chain, that process, Joel, of you order 500 books for the printer, and then where do those books go?
Yeah, and I will walk you through that, but I'll tell you a story first, and that is a couple of years ago, I was interviewing Guy Kawasaki when he was publishing his book Ape, Author, Publisher, Entrepreneur, which is a really cool book. And it's, you know, he gave the whole self-publishing business the Guy Kawasaki treatment, and it's very cool. However, you know, after I read the book before I interviewed him, and I said to him after the interview, I said, you know, Guy, this is all great, and all the information is great, but you left something out. And he said, well, what did I leave out? Because it was a pretty big book. I said, you know, all you've got in here for print books is print on demand. I said, 80% of the books being produced in the United States today and sold are printed offset. They're not printed print on demand. Most print books aren't print on demand books. It's just the way the world works. So in the end, I ended up writing a whole section for his book, and he put it in the ebook about how you do print books. But basically, regular books, not color books, photography books, coffee table books, I'm talking about regular trade books. Those are all printed in the US. The center of the short-run book printing industry is in Michigan, in fact, although that's not really important. We have a fantastic short-run book printing industry in the United States with many operators, and some of them are really very good. So basically, you have to identify a couple of printers. You fill out a request for an estimate. It's like a whole different kind of situation that you have with print on demand. The printers give you the estimates. I actually have a whole series of articles about how to create and then read the estimates that they give you. You pick the printer, you upload your files, they print the books. Now here's where it gets a little dicey, because when the books are printed, they're going to send you an invoice. They will not ship the books until you pay the invoice. So there is a certain amount of risk here. That's why I said up front, you know, if you are pretty sure you can sell 500 books in 6 months, then this will work for you. Once you take possession of the books, you know, you've got a couple of choices. You can try to get a book distributor to distribute the books for you. That can be complicated, and if you're going to do that, you have to know that up front before you even start. Now, why is that? The reason is that most book distributors, if they're going to accept a self-published author, they're going to ask for about 65 to 75% off the retail price. So in other words, the book that you slaved over, maybe if the retail price is $10, they're only going to pay you about $2.50 to $3 a book. That's it. You got to pay for the production of the books. You got to ship them to the distributor. Another way you can go is to get a fulfillment company. And basically, they warehouse a small number of the books, like maybe 1 or 2 cartons. And maybe you've got 20 or 30 books in a carton. And then they have like an 800 number and an order line, and you can make up all the orders, go to the fulfillment company, and they fill the orders. They fill them out, the order forms, they put a label on it, they pack it in a jiffy bag, and out the door it goes. And this is what they do. It's book fulfillment would be what you would be looking for. That's not a bad approach. The other thing is you can do it yourself, and obviously many people just get the books shipped to their house. 500 books, you know, it is about 20 cartons if you got 25 books in a carton. So if you have room to store 20 cartons of books, by the way, they're heavy.
Yeah, I know.
You can do it yourself. And what's going to happen is you're going to become a merchant in the Amazon marketplace, and you're going to provide the books to Amazon. Amazon will order books from you, and you'll fill the orders. The problem is they're going to order like 1 or 2, unless your book actually is selling. If it's selling, then they're going to do decent size orders. But you know, that is the game as it's played today. Either you got a book distributor, which is going to cost you a huge chunk of money. You can do a fulfillment house where you'll be paying on a transaction basis, like each transaction has a fee. The jiffy bag has a fee, the label has a fee. When you add all the fees up, hopefully you're still making money. And the third way is to kind of self-distribute, and that is to warehouse the books yourself and just fill orders, you know, trundle them down to the post office, and away you go. I did that for many years.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work to me. I love print on demand.
I love print on demand. I'm never touching another jiffy bag in my life if I can help it.
Yeah, awesome. So, you know, then for your own books, and maybe for some of the clients that you work with, you know, what are some obvious cases other than what we've talked about where you would recommend not to go print on demand?
Well, if you know, the scenario where you want to sell books in bookstores almost demands that you use offset printing. So if you, and you can go to a bookstore, Tom, or your viewers can go to a bookstore and start wandering the bookstore. And I would challenge anybody in any bookstore that they would have to look at thousands of books before they would find one that was a print-on-demand book. Because it's just the way it is. The bookstores, you know, when print-on-demand first came out, the quality wasn't great. Let's face it, the books are printed on copy machines, basically big, sophisticated copy machines, but they're still copy machines. It's xerography with toner and all that stuff. And, you know, there was a big prejudice against digitally printed books because many of them were just junky when the process first got started. Now they're much better now. I would say print-on-demand paperbacks now are very close to the quality of an offset printed book. Basically, you're going to be talking about your distribution method and your quantities. If you're only going to sell like 4 or 5 books a month, of paperback books, it's a print-on-demand book. You know what I'm saying? But if you have any real sales potential, or if you want to try to push the book out into bookstores, a very difficult thing for a self-publisher to do, by the way, you know, then you really have to go offset. Because if you want to distribute the books widely, think about it. You've got to print hundreds of books if you want them in hundreds of bookstores. It just makes sense, right?
Definitely. And you want to lower that cost, like you said, because you're only getting $2 or $3 from a distributor and you can't have high print-on-demand costs.
You got to lower the cost both for distribution, or if you go with the fulfillment house, you're still going to have fees. It's not going to be as big a bite as the distributor. But, you know, look, the retailers want at minimum a 40% off the list price. So your $10 book is only going to pay out $6 from the retailer. So then who else is in the chain of distribution? You know, is there a wholesaler? Is there a fulfillment house? Is there a distributor? Each company or each layer in the distribution chain has to have a profit. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So all of those profits come from you, the book publisher. So you have to make sure, going all the way back, when you look at that production cost, you have to add everything else in, look at your intended retail, the discount you're going to sell it at. See, am I going to make any money on this book? And, you know, if you have a good, healthy profit in there, then go for it. The problem with that scenario, Tom, is that very few self-publishers have a book that will sell widely enough, or the money to put into the project to actually do the publicity and marketing it would take to get enough interest to have bookstores stock it. And then we have to talk about traffic. How are you going to get, let's say, people in, I don't know, St. Petersburg, Florida, to walk into their bookstore and ask for your book? How are you going to do that? Or people in Seattle, or people in New York? I mean, it's really, really difficult for self-publishers to do that. It can be done, but it does take some work.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. Well, so let's imagine then someone listening right now, you know, they've got that national platform, they've got the big marketing budget, their plan is to self-publishing, get in all these retailers. Are they still at a significant disadvantage in comparison to, you know, traditional publishers when it comes to, you know, printing costs and the entire supply chain? Has that really evened the playing field nowadays, or is there still a big disadvantage for self-publishers in that arena to actually get that distribution?
I don't think there's a big disadvantage for self-publishers. The only big disadvantage is, you know, making it into the distribution chain. So, for instance, I have a colleague who does a lot of books like this, and I work with her, and she does the marketing end. And she's been able to put books into, self-published books into like airport bookstores and stuff. That's a tough market to crack. It's a great market for books because they sell a ton of books, those bookstores. And but she was able to do it through a willing distributor who distributes to those stores. But, you know, the author himself would not have had a chance because he didn't have any of the contacts. He didn't know the operators. He didn't know who sold the books. So, you know, self-publishers are at a disadvantage because they don't know the industry and they don't have contacts. If the book is done well and it looks just like a book you would get from Random House or HarperCollins or something like that, there won't be much resistance in the market. The only resistance is they want to know what your marketing plans are. Like, are you running a TV advertising campaign? You're running space ads in newspapers all over the country? I mean, look at the way the publishers promote their front list titles when they come out. and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, because it takes that kind of muscle, getting the author on, the Today Show, running ads in book supplements or book review sections of newspapers. All of that stuff takes a lot of money. Now, the book publishers don't do that for every book. They only do it for the books that they are pretty sure are going to sell. So if you ask me about were self-publishers as a disadvantage, self-publishers are disadvantaged because we have to do it all ourselves, or we have to get somebody knowledgeable to help us do specific parts of the process. As far as the books themselves, no, I don't think self-publishers are at any disadvantage, because we can now produce books that are the equivalent quality in every way of books coming from traditional publishers.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, I love that. And it's awesome to know that, the field has been leveled somewhat, maybe not 100% of the way now. Like you said, you still need those contacts and those relationships to get those deals. But it's great to know that overall the field has really gotten much more fair and much easier to produce, like you said, just really high quality books. And I think at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. The reader doesn't care if your book comes from Random House or HarperCollins or, Joel's house. They don't care who the publisher is. They just want a good quality book to entertain them or educate them.
It's pretty rare to find a book buyer who's buying books based on who published them.
Yeah, totally.
If you can get on the shelf and your book is the quality that it should be, that's competing head to head with books from these other publishers, you shouldn't be at any disadvantage. As a matter of fact, in many ways, self-publishers are at an advantage because we are much more nimble. We could move much faster than most traditional publishers who are going to take, even for a book they already acquired, are going to take 1.5 to 2 years to get that book out. We could do that in a month, a few weeks. And that always astonishes people who have only published traditionally. So I think also the movement we've seen, Tom, in the last year or two of more and more traditionally published authors becoming hybrid authors, where they're publishing some of their books with their traditional publisher, but they're either acquiring the rights to older books, or they're acquiring the digital rights to books, or they're writing some books that they want to publish themselves. So they're actually working on both sides of the fence. And I think that's fascinating, personally. And I think part of the reason is because if they want to put a book out on a hot subject, they could have it out in a few weeks. They don't have to wait and go through the whole rigmarole of the agent, the editor, everything. So that's an advantage, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So you think the traditional publishing timeline then is still about 2 years, most people say?
Once it gets signed, it's 1.5 to 2 years. That, because traditional publishers publish by seasonal lists. So what they're doing is they're acquisition editors. They're buying books for a particular season. Like right now, they might be buying fall 2017 titles or spring 2018. They're buying books for those titles that are that far out. So there's no way you're going to see the book before then, because it takes them all of that time, and they get, a year from now, they're going to do their spring catalog, and your book's going to be listed in it. And it just takes X amount of time, because you have to go through all the layers in the publishing organization, the marketers, the designers, the editing, all that stuff. So it does take time on their side. On our side, we can be much more nimble. Our other advantage is that we can do stuff like talk to our readers. In traditional publishing has always been a business-to-business enterprise. The publishers never have sold books to book readers, which sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But it's true. They sell books to wholesalers, to retailers, to distributors, and those people, eventually the books dribble out to the readers. You and I, on the other hand, we can talk to our readers any day of the week. We can query them, we can run surveys off them, we can get them into conversations, we can have Google Hangouts with our readers, and we can really get this tremendous market intelligence that, traditional publishers don't have any way of getting that information.
Yeah, that absolutely is a great strength of, being a self-published author, is that you get the feedback as the author, but you're also the publisher. And so, readers will talk to you as the author in a totally different way than they would ever talk to a publisher. You know, if a publisher showed up for a book signing, you know, no one wants to talk to them. They want to talk to the author, right? And they're not going to tell you, they're not going to tell the publisher their fears and their worries and why they love the book so much. And so we really do get that hands-on feedback at a much deeper level than any publisher can really hope to get if they're not, you know, like a self-published author.
Yeah, and in many cases, self-published authors are part of their own market. Okay, so instead of being an editor in New York somewhere who's publishing into, let's say, the how to help people overcome depression or something, you know, most likely the self-published author who's writing that book about how to overcome depression is somebody who overcame depression themselves. So in other words, what I'm saying is they are in the market that they're selling to. That gives us a certain kind of simpatico or you know, an intimacy with our own readers that, you know, you just can't get from a conglomerate publisher with their headquarters 3,000 miles away on the 62nd floor of some building somewhere. It just doesn't work the same way.
Definitely. Well, do you think, you know, this kind of advantage that we have now as self-published authors, do you think that's going to grow over time? And do you think the traditional publishers are being, you know, too slow to react or change to the changes in the industry?
Well, I think that, you know, publishers have a lot of money at stake. So the money will drive the publishing industry to change because otherwise it'll just die off. So they're going to keep trying to keep up with the market. I think really, you know, rather than book publishing devolving into millions of little people each publishing a book, I don't think that's really what the future of publishing is, you know, like it's going to become just a sea of self-published authors. No, I think, and I predicted this a couple of years ago, and it's really happening. Like one thing that's happening is people who self-publish, a certain percentage of them really like it, or they're successful and they do well and they have an influence in the world. They make money maybe, or they have an impact. So now, once you've done it, and like you, Tom, after you publish one book, you publish the next book. Hey, the second one's a lot easier, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You've already figured it out. You've got the infrastructure set up. The third one's even easier. Now you're like a publisher. You've got a workflow that works for you. You've got a market. Hopefully you're publishing all books that are going to sell to the same market, so you can keep developing that relationship with that market. And what I find is that people in that position will frequently start publishing books for other people. Because if you've got a buddy who's an author and he's written a book and the book actually looks pretty good, but maybe that guy doesn't want to learn about typesetting and trim sizes and distribution. So what's happening is a small percentage of these self-publishers are turning into either small presses, which is the first stage of becoming like a publishing company, or they're becoming cooperative enterprises where maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5 authors who have different skills. Like some people like doing sales, everybody else hates it. Some people like doing formatting, most people hate that. So if you spread out the tasks and you all publish under the same imprint, you can have a lot more fun and a better effect than doing it by yourself. And some of them are even opening bookstores. So I think that the self-publishers are moving towards, you know, some of them are just publishing a ton of books. That's interesting. But I think there are also, like there's a whole a flood of these small presses and cooperative publishing enterprises that are starting to rise up. I think that's more likely to be influential in the future of book publishing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's just economies of scale involved there. You know, being one author, one self-publisher by yourself, like you said, there's so many different tasks: the formatting, the cover design, interior design, so forth. If you can, you know, find specialists in each of those areas and all, you know, work together with, you know, several authors and several titles, you really do get a much more efficient process overall.
And it's, you know, it works also for 2 other reasons. One is because it's really impractical to expect every author who wants to publish their book to become an expert on all these areas. That's just crazy. You know, if my plumbing breaks, I don't go buy a book on plumbing. I call the plumber. I say, come over here and fix it. So the other way it works is because suppose you do, like let's say you're a successful author and you find other successful authors in your market with good manuscripts, and you think, well, heck, you know, my readers would probably enjoy Jim's book too. So you publish that, and maybe that does well, and you start publishing a few other books that do well. Pretty soon the people in the book industry start to recognize your publishing company as somebody who publishes good books that people like to buy. So you start to have a certain kind of influence in the industry, and you can get better distribution deals, and you can, you know, get better deals on fulfillment or whatever, shipping. I mean, everything becomes better if you have a little bit more weight to put behind it. You know, the part that doesn't work is the author with one book trying to you know, pay their mortgage or something with the one book. It's really a long shot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just makes sense. Like you mentioned, all these little cooperatives and small publishing companies, like that's, you know, it made sense for me to start taking on clients because I had the skills already. You know, I was like years ahead of my clients and in terms of what they knew about the industry. And so it just, you know, to format an ebook for me, I could do that in 10 minutes. You know, it was like, it was a breeze, or other people would take them weeks to even, you know, just get confused about it. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. And, yeah, it's exciting to see the future of, you know, more authors coming together, sharing information like you've done with your website, you know, working together to make great books for people and you know, to share their message and stories with the world. It's really exciting to see.
Great stuff. I love it. You know, I'm a big fan of people publishing their own books. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and you know, I think that everybody who does that, really, whether the books sell a lot or not, isn't really a big concern to me. I mean, some books are going to do really well and make a lot of money, and other ones aren't. I've worked on books that were intended to be read by like 10 or 12 people. That's the whole reason they were published. So I like that. I like people putting the fruit of their wisdom or their life experience into the world, or their imagination, whatever it is, because I think it enriches our culture. So I have no problem with people publishing books. I just think that the, you know, authors should really do their own work, give their own work the respect to publish it properly and give it a chance to succeed in the world.
Absolutely, totally agreed. Well, Joel, thanks so much for all your wisdom today. It's been amazing, and I'd love to hear more about, you know, the work that you're doing right now and where people can find out more about you and connect with you.
Well, my central location is my blog. There are links there to all my e-commerce site. I sell book templates, marketing tools for authors. I've got the only project manager for indie authors to do their book publishing and our book planner. But the best place to find all that stuff is at my blog, which is at thebookdesigner.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joel. It's been a pleasure having you.
Well, thanks, Tom. It's been a blast.